As someone who just recently had a baby, some of the conversations that have come up have talked about daycare, whether I would choose to send my child to daycare, reasons people go to daycare. I actually did work in a daycare when I was in high school, when I was in my senior year. So for that entire school year, I worked in a daycare, probably at least about 10 hours a week, if not more at times. And after doing that, I decided I was not going to be sending my child to daycare in the future. Um, uh, at least as much as I could control that outcome. I understand there are some people who don't want to send their kids to daycare, and that's kind of the only option they feel that they have. And my heart definitely reaches out to you. But here are some of the reasons why I had that philosophy. And then here are some of the choices that I made to support my decision so that way in the future I wouldn't be kind of pigeonholed into putting my son into daycare. So I actually worked at a daycare that was very prestigious. It was a very good daycare. It was likely pretty expensive. It was well known as a very solid daycare. It wasn't like the in the basement of some random person's house. It was well known for education and socialization for your children, and it was just a very well run daycare. The people there were kind for the most part. The workers, I mean, there was a high turnover, but that's with most daycares. But for the most part, they really did seem to care about the children. They followed all the state's ratios as far as how many teachers to how many children. At the end of the day, I saw so many of the children coming into daycare. And at the end of the day, they would come and their parents came in, and there would be one of two reactions. Either they were running to their parents and be like, "Where have you been the whole day?" At first they would scream. They would just cry. The first several weeks that they went to daycare, it was crying, sadness, where have you been? Or they had been at the daycare for so long, their parents would come that they would just look at them and then just turn away, no, don't take me away yet. I want to stay with my teachers. I want to stay with my friends. And to me, both of those responses were a little bit heartbreaking. Now, that wasn't the response for every single child in the daycare, but those were the two most common responses when their parents would come. I think it's very sad, and I know that there's so many women out there who feel so sad because they want to be at home with their kids, but that's just not the possibility for them. And the choices that they've made throughout life that the culture has really told them to make haven't benefited them being able to be at home with their kids. Unfortunately, I think part of that is just the culture has told us that the highest level of success that we should be striving for, especially as women, is to be in the workforce, is to be contributing through a career. And a lot of women really truly, when they do have that child, or when they reach 30 and they're maybe I want to have a relationship, maybe I want to get married, maybe I do want to have children. And certainly there are exceptions to this, but the wide vast majority of women want to get married, they want to give life, and they want to have children. And when they do have those children, they realize, I want to be spending more time with my children than everyone told me that I would want to be spending. And I want to do more things with my kids than what everyone told me. Everyone told me I would only want my career, that that's the only step up, that money is what mattered, that building my career, that being this boss lady, that's what the end goal was. And so I think that there are a lot of women out there who they're very heartbroken over leaving their children at daycare, but they feel that they have no other option, or that perhaps their husband is you know what, we agreed when we got married that we'd have two incomes, so you're going back to work. There's definitely that perspective as well. With that being said, if there is a way for you to avoid sending your child to daycare, I saw so many of those children suffer in a negative way from being left for so long at daycare. Now, the less time that the kids were at daycare, I think the more well-adjusted they were, generally the more well-behaved they were. I mean, really, truly, when we do have children, there is this kind of like, there's a one adult to one, two, maybe three young children at a time. And by the time your children are a little bit older, like then you have maybe some older children and then three more younger children. But the adult to young child ratio is usually one or two, really, truly, if not maybe three. In some circumstances, maybe you got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a little 0-year-old, little baby. But because daycare does have such large ratios, it's very difficult to be deeply ingrained in the training of each individual child. And so when someone steals a toy, there's a lot of times where it's not like sat there and had the conversation of, you know what, like, we don't steal toys from other kids. You say I'm sorry to this other child. Oh, it's time to put the toys away. Like, let's put the toys away, or whatever the case might be. It's hard to have that very strong relationship between caregiver and child when there is such large ratios of teacher to children. And I think primarily the reason those ratios are so large is just because so many people need daycare that there's not enough supply of daycares to have those ratios be lower. But even with that, no one is going to care about your child the way you care about your child. They might be a great person, they might, be a great mentor to your children, but likely, they're not going to be as invested in the outcome of your child as much as you are as a parent, presumably as the mother of your own child. And so I would see mothers come in and they'd want to be, putting on their kids' coats, and like they'd be just like, you could tell that they wanted to be around their child, but that for some reason that was not their situation. Because I did experience that when I was in high school, I had been saving my money, and I continued to save my money so that way I wouldn't have to be in that situation. When my husband and I got married, we lived off of one income. From the get-go, my income was always secondary. It was always extra. I actually did get a virtual job right out of college because I knew that I wanted to be a mom and that I wanted to stay home with my little babies, and especially while my children were little, that's what I wanted to pursue, and that's what I wanted to be my priority. But it did take a lot of decisions that led me to this point, and I think that there's a lot of women out there who haven't made those same decisions, not because they necessarily didn't want to, but it's just because they've been told that those are not the decisions you should be making. You should not be saving your money for potentially staying at home with your children. You shouldn't be focusing on getting married and having children in general. Like, you should be focused on building your career, on just going out, go to the bar, have fun in your 20s. And while there are people that enjoy that, I do think that there's a lot of people who feel left behind in the dust because people just kept telling them, that's not what your priority should be. Push this instead. Push that out. Push that till later. And once later comes, then you can take care of it. I saw the same thing with a lot of students when I counseled students on their financial situations. I graduated with a degree in financial planning, and so as part of that, I got to counsel some students, but a lot of those students' parents, surprisingly, would be like, we're getting loans out for you, thousands of dollars of loans that are in your name, but I don't want you to worry about that right now because you're supposed to be having fun. And so they would encourage their student, go have fun, don't worry about the money, don't worry about this, like you'll take care of that later. But it was the student who had the loans, and the student was the one who had to take care of that later, and later came, and then they're like, how am I supposed to pay this off? And they were in a very bad financial situation because people just kept telling them, you'll worry about that later. Don't worry about that now. Don't plan for that now. Worry about that later. So all of that to say, if you are a younger person and you're hearing this, you're hearing, you know what, daycare might not be the most ideal place for your young children, I would encourage you, start making the choices now to have that option open. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take it, but have an option open where you feel financially secure enough that you can step back from the workforce if that's what you want to do. And if that time comes and you don't have that financial security, or if you don't want to, you don't have to. But if you at least have that option available and open to you, it will help you, I think, in the long run, help a lot more women in the long run. And if you are one of those women who drops their kids off at a daycare and then leaves to go to work, I would encourage you, do the math, see how much you're spending because you're going out and about. See if there is a way that you can stay home, if that's something that you desire for your children. I know that there are many children who would benefit from moms staying at home with them, or other family members maybe getting to watch them instead of sending them to a structured daycare. I talk about all things countercultural, thinking about things from a different perspective that's not quite what the norm is or what everyone's going along with right now. So if that's something that interests you, go ahead and click that subscribe button and follow along on my journey. Thank you guys so much for watching.